Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I hope your day is starting off just fantastic. Behind me here is a picture of the hoodoos. That is a real word. The hoodoos in the Badlands of Alberta, shared on the I Choose Canada site by Logan, who this year canceled his long planned trip to the Pacific Northwest in the United States and chose instead to do a road trip in Canada. He chose Canada. Speaking of which, I just got my I Choose Canada hat. Pretty nice, eh? Eh? And now you have to answer the question, did I show you the hat simply to advertise the hat, or did I show you the hat as an excuse to explain my disheveled hair? That's a question you'll have to answer. In this video, I'm going to explain to you how the world has basically learned how to deal with Donald Trump. The whole world, other than maybe Doug Ford. But basically the strategy is to just placate the little child, try not to upset him, but slowly go about your business excluding the United States. I'm going to explain how China is basically playing three-dimensional chess versus a little child who doesn't even know how to play checkers. And China's efforts are resulting in some huge benefits and potential future benefits for Canada. Now, I'm going to show you some actual data in this video to prove the point. But before I do that, let me try and articulate the US position according to Donald Trump. And it goes something like, the United States is the hottest country in the world, and there's been 17 trillion has come in. 17 in the 6 months we had 17 trillion, and Joe Biden, he only had like 1 trillion or less than 1 trillion, but now there's 17 trillion. And I could try and look up some data to substantiate those remarks, but how do I explain it here? Sometimes when the president makes remarks, he's, what's a polite way of saying it? Full of shit. Ronald Reagan doesn't like tariffs. He never liked tariffs, but Canada said he did. It was a fake ad, so I'm going to increase tariffs on Canada. Now, when you research what economic news based in the United States is on the level of trillions, you can find this story. The US hits 38 trillion in debt after the fastest accumulation of 1 trillion outside the pandemic. Now, these numbers are shocking. The 38 trillion debt update is found on the latest Treasury Department report, which logs the nation's daily finances. In this article on Yahoo Finance, published on October 23rd, in the midst of a federal government shutdown, the U.S. government's gross national debt surpassed 38 trillion Wednesday, a record number that highlights the accelerating accumulation of debt on America's balance sheet. It's also the fastest accumulation of $1 trillion in debt outside COVID-19 pandemic. The US hit 37 trillion in gross national debt in August this year. August, September, October. In 3 months, the United States has added $1 trillion of additional debt. The US is the hottest country in the world. We're adding trillions. There's trillions. 17, I think, trillions. Either those are coming in or dead. I'm not really sure. Now, that $1 trillion of accumulated debt was a real number. At the same time, Trump is setting new China tariff rate after an amazing meeting with Xi Jinping. We had an amazing meeting and we have a new deal, a fantastic deal with China. Average tariffs drop on Chinese exports to 47%, lower than previous Trump threats, but still higher than 2024. And Donald Trump made this fantastic deal in response to the latest threat from China. They threatened to cut off all critical minerals exports to the United States, a move that some analysts say would, within a couple of weeks, just shut down the U.S. economy. Not shut down the coffee shops and the gas stations and the restaurants, but basically shut down the supply chain of the most critical piece, the most critical input to the most profitable industries in the United States. I guess that's why they're called critical minerals. So let me recap this fantastic deal that Donald Trump made. He took office and immediately started a trade war with China, ratcheting tariffs up to a really high level, at one point 100% or more. China retaliated and they got into a trade war. They've since been posturing back and forth, and got those tariffs down to about 57%, still much higher than when he took office. And now when China threatens to completely cut off critical mineral exports to the United States, which would be a fatal blow, The United States decides, well, we'll lower the tariffs another 10%. Please don't cut off the critical minerals. There, see, we have a great deal. Tariffs are still much higher than when he took office, and trade between the two countries is still cratering. China pivoting quickly to trade with all sorts of other countries. I'll show you those details in a minute. But now the US declares, we have a fantastic deal with China. Let me explain it with an analogy because there's numbers in there and some people don't really follow exactly what's going on. So I'll paint a picture for you that's more easy to understand. Donald Trump got elected. He walked into the Oval Office and pulled down his pants and took a big shit on top of the desk. And then he called to his aides and the Chinese ambassador and the Chinese and said, hey, there's shit on my desk. I want you guys to clean up that shit. But that didn't happen. The Chinese sent over a package, a gift for Trump, which he had to pay a tariff on when he imported it into the United States. And it was another hunk of shit, which he put on his desk. So his desk was completely covered in shit. And so now what he's done is he's scraped off about 1/3 of the shit on his desk and said, hey, see? You see? We're starting to clean this shit up. In the United States, this is known as the art of the deal. But let's look at some actual numbers now on this chart, a summary of some data that you can get on trading economics. How have exports from China changed over the past year? Basically since Donald Trump took office. Well, China has completely pivoted. Exports to the United States are down 27%. But they've pivoted by increasing their exports to the EU by 14% and exports to Asia by almost 16%. Despite some of the trade irritants between Canada and China on a few sectors, they've also pivoted to Canada. China emerging as top customer for Canadian oil shipped via Trans Mountain Pipeline. And by top customer of the exports of oil from this pipeline, we're not talking about a small number. The pipeline has capacity of about 1 million barrels a day, and I think is currently producing at around 850,000 barrels a day. And the majority of that is going to China rather than the United States. And it is not simply the case that China is buying additional oil that's on the market. They're just buying up Canadian oil exports because they need it. There's more demand. They are actively pivoting away from the US to buy the Canadian product. And on this graph here that goes way back to 2016, you can see the amount of barrels per month that China has imported in blue from the United States and in white from Canada. And you can see that over the past 10 years, China has really imported virtually no oil from Canada. But since that Trans Mountain Pipeline came online, you'll notice the white line there is starting to trend up as China pivots to Canada, buying Canadian oil. And you can see the blue line heading down. They are basically replacing what they would have bought from the United States, and instead they're buying it from Canada. China is actively pivoting their trade away from the United States and towards all countries in the world, including Canada, even though our relations are strained right now. But you won't hear any bombastic comments coming from the president of China. You won't read any ridiculous posts on X or Truth Social from Xi Jinping. The Chinese are just quietly going about their business, playing three-dimensional chess, while the US just flounders around with disastrous trade policies. And I really think these disastrous trade policies, I call them, these implementation of tariffs on all imports from all over the world, are done in response to this out-of-control escalation of the US debt. They're adding debt at $1 trillion every 3 months. It's simply unsustainable. And I think they feel that they have no choice but trying to raise money by tariffing other nations. Now, the problem is that their leader, the spokesman for their country, is such an arrogant asshole that everyone in the world hates him. And he's going to do more damage to the United States with countries pivoting away from them completely than if they had a more diplomatic leader that would try to negotiate with countries and try and do this sort of diplomatically rather than an insulting, arrogant, threatening asshole way. You know, it's something that we've all learned in life, but people are more likely to want to work with people that are nice than to work with assholes. It's just a human tendency. And the latest development that I mentioned at the beginning of the video, that this pivot from China could really be a benefit to Canada. The recent news, Carney and Xi agreed to tackle irritants in the Canada-China relationship after they met in the Asia summit just a couple of days ago. But that meeting was followed up by the Chinese ambassador to Canada, who was interviewed on CTV, and he made some very interesting comments. Let me play those for you.
Prime Minister Carney has said that he is aiming, he told this to a business crowd at the summit, he wants to double non-U.S. exports out of Canada over the next decade. Would China like to double their imports from Canada?
I want to make it very clear. China, we have taken very open and positive approach to expand our economic and trade cooperation with Canada. What I'm looking forward is not only double our trade if both sides have enough capabilities and have enough competitive products, why we not make this trade triple than what we already have now.
So China is open for business, and the Chinese ambassador has basically played China's card here and said, Canada, if you want to do business with us, we're ready. As long as the products are competitive and it's a mutually beneficial exchange, China is ready to deal. So I'm not exaggerating when I say that the potential here is huge. The Chinese economy is almost 10 times the size of Canada. They're a huge trading nation, and they've been pushed into our arms, or I guess you could say the two of us have been put together because of the asshole. It's just like children in a playground. You'd like for all of them to play nicely together, but if one of the kids is an asshole, then the other kids just stop playing with him. And that's what's happening in the world. And China is moving at light speed to pivot their trade with all major countries in the world. And they're certainly making huge strides in Asia and with the other BRICS nations that they're close with. And China is going to keep going at full speed, whether Canada wants to get on board or not. We just have to decide, is it worth trading with China? Is it worth pivoting some of our exports to China and potentially allowing some Chinese products into Canada? And the big one, of course, is electric vehicles. And that's not going to be a simple discussion because we have an auto industry here in Canada that's integrated with the United States. There'll have to be some negotiations on whether that can be done. I'm very optimistic in saying that, yes, I think it can be. We just need to carefully negotiate that so that if we open our market to Chinese EVs, we get something in exchange for that. And not just the lifting of tariffs on canola, that we get something back from that in the auto industry, maybe having China come and build some of those EVs in Canada, or supply a lot of the materials to manufacture those things from Canada to build the batteries and all the materials. Some sort of a detailed negotiation to open up our market like that, because the United States wants to close that market. They're actively working at destroying our auto industry. So there is the dilemma. There is the big question. And I'm interested in your comments in the comment section. We're going down a path that we probably none of us expected before Donald Trump got elected. But those days are gone. Now we have a president in the White House that says, we don't need your cars. We have all our cars. We don't need your milk. We got a lot of milk. And if you wanted to become the 51st state, you could avoid all this. I'm an asshole. Why don't you play with me? Why are you playing with all those other kids? Just because I'm an asshole, I'm the biggest asshole. And in case you didn't know, the U.S. is the hottest country in the world now. I guess that's his strategy. But you know what? It's not working. It's not working. So we have to figure out what we want to do. I'm interested in your comments. Thanks for watching my videos. Subscribe to the channel if you are enjoying them. If you want to support this channel on a monthly basis, consider becoming a channel member by clicking the join button below. Have a fantastic rest of your day, everyone, and I'll catch you all on the next one.